I woke up in a hospital room, the kind that feels like it's made of sterile air and dull, fluorescent lights. My head throbbed like a drumbeat, and when I tried to move, pain shot through my body in jagged, unpredictable bursts. I couldn't remember how I got here, just a vague, blurry recollection of metal twisting, glass shattering. There was a hospital beep in the background, and the taste of copper on my tongue. A nurse was standing beside my bed, her eyes soft but filled with the kind of sympathy that made me uncomfortable. "You've been unconscious for 2 days," she told me, her voice calm, almost too calm. "You were in a pretty serious crash, but you're going to be okay." I didn't feel okay. Hell, I didn't even feel like me. I blinked up at the ceiling, trying to clear the fog in my head. And then I saw her, Molly. She was sitting by my side, her eyes red-rimmed but distant, as if she'd been crying but didn't want to let anyone know. She wasn't looking at me, though. She was looking at some man standing just behind her, a guy I didn't recognize. "Who's that?" I croaked, my throat dry and rough. Molly looked at me then, her lips pressing into a thin line. "This is Derek King," she said, her voice flat. "He was the one who found you." The guy, Derek, stepped forward. He was well-dressed, in a sharp suit and a watch that screamed money. His gaze lingered on me for a second too long, and there was something about the way he stood, too confident, too sure of himself, that made me want to ask more questions. But I didn't, not yet. I tried to sit up, but the pain made me stop. "So, what happened?" My voice felt weak, almost foreign. "He stayed with you until the ambulance came," Molly said. Her words clipped, like she was trying to get this over with as quickly as possible. "He helped Nate. You should thank him." "Thank him? For what?" I wanted to say something, but the words didn't come out. Instead, I just stared at her, at Molly. She wasn't the same, her warmth, her concern. All of it seemed to have vanished. It made me feel cold, empty. Derek smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Glad I could help," he said. "You're a lucky man, Nate." Lucky? Maybe. But something about him, something about the whole situation, felt off. Like there was more to the story than what they were telling me. Molly didn't even seem fazed. She just nodded, her hand brushing against Derek's arm before she pulled away. It was a small thing, but I noticed, and it pissed me off. "How long will I be here?" I asked, desperate to get my bearings. The nurse hesitated. "You'll be in ICU for a while. The doctors are running some tests, but you're stable now." "Stable? Yeah, but not okay." I looked at Molly again, and she gave me a tight smile, but there was no real feeling behind it. No real connection. "Are you all right?" I asked her, my voice barely a whisper. Her eyes flicked to Derek before she looked back at me. "I'm fine, Nate. Just focus on getting better." And then, as if it was nothing, she stood up, the man, Derek, right beside her. "We'll leave you to rest," she said, her tone as cold as the room around me. They left without another word, and I was left lying there, my heart racing, a knot forming in my stomach. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. I didn't know it then, but that moment, it was the first sign that my life had already been taken from me. They left. Just like that, Molly and Derek slipped out of the room, their footsteps fading behind the heavy hospital door. I stared at the space where they'd been, my heart pounding in a way that had nothing to do with the accident. A knot was growing in my stomach, tightening with every second. The nurse was still there, adjusting something on the 4 line, but I wasn't really paying attention. I just kept replaying the scene in my head. Their strange detachment, the way Molly wouldn't look me in the eyes, the way Derek's presence felt like it was everywhere, even after they were gone. The nurse finally left, leaving me alone. Good, I thought. Let me think. I leaned back into the pillows, wincing as the movement stretched the muscles in my back. The pain was a steady throb, but it was nothing compared to the ache gnawing at me in my gut. I wasn't just hurt. I was starting to feel sick. I wasn't an idiot. Something was off, and I could feel it deep in my bones. I tried to remember what had happened, what led to me being here, but it felt like I was trying to piece together a broken puzzle. The more I thought about it, the fuzzier everything got. I remembered being on the highway, though, Late afternoon. The sky already darkening with that dull purple color. I just finished up a long day at the shop, wiping my hands clean, trying to shake off the weight of everything. Work, bills, my shitty marriage. I hadn't felt connected to Molly in months, maybe even longer. Things between us had been strained, silent in ways that made me want to crawl out of my own skin. But it was more than that. There was a distance I couldn't ignore anymore, not when it was choking the air out of every room I was in with her. There was one night about 2 weeks ago when everything seemed to click. I'd been driving back into town when I spotted Molly's car parked outside that damn hotel downtown. The one with the fancy valet and the high-end restaurants. I told myself it was just a coincidence, but deep down, I knew better. I pulled over, told myself it was nothing, just her running errands or whatever. But the knot in my stomach had been there ever since. I called her right then. She didn't answer, of course, just let it ring. But I saw her car, and I saw her walk out of the hotel, her heels clicking on the pavement. She wasn't alone. Another guy was with her. I didn't recognize him, but I'll never forget the way he touched her arm when she stepped into the parking lot, like they were in on some private joke. I'd hung up on her call that night, still staring out my windshield, watching her slip into that man's car. My hand had been shaking when I started to dial again, but when she picked up, her voice was calm, too calm, like she'd been expecting it. "Hey babe, I'm just at a friend's house." A friend's house? I knew it was a lie. I knew it in the way her words fell flat, in the way she didn't ask about me, didn't ask how my day was. She was lying, and I didn't want to believe it, but I did. The memory of seeing her leave with that man, the way he'd put his hand on her back as they walked away, it haunted me. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to push it all away, but the truth kept digging its claws deeper. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. Maybe I'd been ignoring the signs for too long, pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. I tried to focus, tried to think straight. My head hurt too much. The pain was sharp and relentless, but my mind was clearer than it had been in months. The fog was lifting, and the more I remembered, the more it clicked. Something wasn't right. I was still lying there, my body aching and my mind spinning, when I heard the door open again. It was a different nurse this time, checking on the machines or whatever. I didn't care. I wasn't going to be distracted. I had to figure out what the hell was going on. Molly's strange coldness, Derek's too perfect appearance, the way he seemed to know exactly what to say to keep her calm while I was stuck in this bed, in the middle of nowhere, with nothing but questions swirling around me. I hadn't imagined it. No, I'd seen the way Molly looked at him, the way her posture softened when Derek was around. It was more than the accident. It was something else, something that made my stomach churn. And as I lay there, the weight of it all coming down on me, I knew one thing for sure. I needed answers. And I wasn't going to stop until I got them. I had barely settled into the quiet of my room when Sam showed up, his face a mix of relief and concern. He'd been my best friend since high school, and he had that way of walking into a room like he owned it, like he could fix anything with a single word. "You look like hell," Sam said, pulling a chair up to my bed, his eyes scanning the room. He was wearing his usual laid-back look. Jeans, a worn t-shirt, and his trademark leather jacket, the one he never took off, even in a hospital. I gave him a lopsided grin, trying to ignore the sharp pang of pain in my chest. "You should see the other guy," I joked, but even I could hear the lack of humor in my voice. Sam raised an eyebrow, his eyes narrowing. "What's really going on, Nate? You look more pissed than you do hurt." I didn't answer right away. Instead, I stared at the ceiling, thinking about Molly and Derek. I could feel Sam's eyes on me, waiting. He wasn't the type to let me hide behind jokes for long. Finally, I met his gaze. "That guy, Derek. The one who says he saved me at the accident." Sam's expression hardened. "What about him?" I told him everything. What I remembered, what felt wrong, and the way Molly had been acting. As I spoke, Sam didn't interrupt. He just listened, nodding occasionally, the gears in his mind clearly turning. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, rubbing his chin. You know I've been picking up some side work as a private investigator, right? He said, like he was trying to decide whether or not to dig into this. Let me look into him. This guy, Derek King, doesn't sit right with me. I nodded, not bothering to ask why. Sam had a sixth sense for this stuff. He didn't just look at people, he studied them. A few days later, Sam came back with news, and I could see by the look on his face that he wasn't pleased. So, Derek King, he started, pulling out his phone and swiping through a few things. The guy says he found you at the crash site, right? Stuck with you till the ambulance came. He paused, letting that sink in. Well, here's the problem. There's nothing about him. Like nothing. No criminal record, no dirt, no red flags. But that doesn't add up, Nate. There's just something off about the guy. I frowned. So, he's clean. Not exactly, Sam said, leaning forward. It's not that there's nothing. It's more like there's too much nothing for someone who claims to be a good Samaritan. And his confidence? It's like he already knows how to play the part of the hero. Not buying it. I rubbed my temples, feeling the headache building again. So what does that mean? You think he's lying? Sam gave a short nod. Yeah, I do. It's like he's inserted himself into this situation on purpose. You know? Like he knows just what to say, just when to show up. It doesn't sit right with me. So I dug a little deeper. What did you find? Sam let out a low breath and tapped his phone. Here's the kicker. Derek King's a consultant. A business consultant. Makes a killing advising companies on restructuring, acquisitions, that kind of thing. No criminal record, but I found some stuff about his clients. Nothing illegal, but it's all shady. A bunch of bad business practices. Manipulation. People lose everything after working with him. I stared at him, piecing the puzzle together. So he's not a hero. He's a shark. Exactly, Sam said, his jaw tightening. I think he's been around people right before their lives crash down. You're not the first, Nate. That hit me like a gut punch. The whole time, I'd thought the accident had just been a freak event. Bad luck, maybe. But now, I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe I was being played. The crash? Maybe it hadn't been an accident at all. Sam kept talking, but my head was spinning. I think it's more than just a bad business deal gone south. This feels like he's been setting something up for a while, and you're the perfect target for it. Nate. I swallowed hard, trying to process everything. It made too much sense, too much too quickly. I couldn't wrap my head around it all, but one thing was clear. Derek King wasn't some stranger trying to help me. He was a threat. And Molly? I asked quietly. Sam's eyes darkened. She's involved too. I looked into her, but I couldn't find much. No obvious red flags. But, I don't know, man. There's a distance there when you talk about her. Something's off. I didn't need him to tell me that. I could see it every time she visited, her coldness. The way she'd give me these brief, awkward smiles before darting off to Derek. It wasn't just weird, it was wrong. But I wasn't ready to face that yet. Not fully. The next few days were a blur of bad sleep. Too much time spent staring at the hospital ceiling, and Molly's cold visits. She didn't stay long. Never more than 10 minutes. Her conversations were short, surface level, like she was trying to avoid anything that might make her actually talk about the things I wanted to know. I did what Sam suggested, research. I dug into Derek King. What I found wasn't pretty. Ties to shady financial deals, manipulative business practices, a long history of people losing everything after working with him. A pattern began to form, and it was one that made my skin crawl. It wasn't just that Derek had inserted himself into my life. It was that he had a track record. He had a habit of showing up in people's lives when they were vulnerable, just before everything fell apart. And that left me with one terrifying thought. What if the crash had been the start of everything falling apart? What if Derek had planned it all along? I could feel the weight of everything pressing down on me more with each passing day. My body was healing, but it was slow and painful, each day stretching into the next, and every inch of me felt like it was bruised. But my mind was sharper than ever, buzzing with questions, with suspicions that I couldn't shake. The more I thought about the accident, the more it didn't add up. So when I finally got a chance to speak with the police officer who'd taken the crash report, I didn't waste it. I was sitting up in bed, feeling the aches in my back and neck, my body begging me to lie down. But I didn't care about the pain. Not anymore. I needed answers. The officer, a tall guy with a gruff voice, came into my room wearing his usual too-tight uniform. He looked like he wanted to be anywhere but here. "Mr. Douglas," he said, his tone polite but distant. "How are you feeling?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I cut straight to the point. "What can you tell me about Derek King, the guy who found me at the crash site?" The officer stiffened, just a little like he'd been caught off guard. "Derek King, you say? Yeah, he was there, helped us out. Stayed with you until the paramedics arrived. That was it? No details? No follow-up?" I pressed harder. "Was he involved in the crash? Did you get a statement from him?" He shifted on his feet like he didn't want to talk about it. "Like I said, he was there. Helped get you out of the truck. Don't know much else." He paused, then added, "It's in the report. You can get a copy when you're out of here." But that was the problem. There was nothing in the report. I'd read it myself. Just a bunch of generic details about the accident. The usual stuff. No mention of Derek other than him being a witness. No mention of what he'd been doing there, why he'd been the one to help. I narrowed my eyes. No mention of how he knew I was in trouble. The officer hesitated, glancing at the door. "I'm sure it's in the report. You should get some rest. You've been through a lot." That was it. That was all he gave me. My gut twisted, and I felt the anger flare up again. Derek's presence in my life was no accident, and I wasn't buying the cops' half-assed answers for a second. After he left, I stared at the ceiling, the questions clawing at me again. Something wasn't right. Derek's involvement, Molly's cold behavior, the fact that nobody seemed to have a clear answer about what happened. It all felt wrong. I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through my recent activity. I needed to piece this together. I knew I'd been trying to send Molly a message before the accident, something important, something that might explain why things between us had been so tense. My fingers hovered over the screen as I found the message. It was still there, unfinished, saved in my drafts. The words jumped out at me. "Molly, we need to talk. About what I saw. About the guy at the hotel." I stopped breathing for a second. I'd been going to confront her. That night, I'd been pissed, no doubt about it, but the crash had stopped me. It stopped everything. The message was supposed to be a confrontation I hadn't gotten to finish. And then I scrolled down and I saw it. The call log. Derek had called me. I stared at the screen for a long, hard moment. He'd called me the night of the crash. I didn't remember answering it, and there were no missed calls on the log, just a timestamp and a short duration. A 2-minute conversation, apparently. 2 minutes that I had no recollection of. I felt my heart speed up, and the blood drained from my face. That was it. That was the piece that tipped everything over the edge. I had no memory of talking to Derek. And yet, there he was, right in the middle of the crash, somehow managing to call me. Right before it happened. The weight of it all crashed down on me in that moment. Molly had been lying. The crash, it wasn't just bad luck. It was part of a bigger plan, something I couldn't see yet, but I knew in my gut was there. And Derek? He wasn't some good Samaritan. He had his hands all over this, all over my life. I shoved the phone down on the bed, a sharp breath rushing out of me. I felt sick. Every time I tried to push the thoughts away, they only came back stronger. The weight of the betrayal, the lies, the mystery of it all was becoming unbearable. And with each passing minute, I realized just how much was crumbling around me. My marriage, my trust in Molly, the life I thought I had. Everything was breaking apart, and I didn't know how to stop it. I tried to focus, to keep my mind clear, but the images kept flashing back. Molly at the hotel, Derek's smooth voice on the phone, the crash. It was all a tangled mess that I couldn't untangle. I couldn't do it alone anymore. Sam had been right. There was something darker at play here, and I was too deep in it to see it all on my own. But I was going to find out. One way or another, I was going to find out exactly who Derek King was and what he'd done to me, because I wasn't going to let this slide. Not now. Not ever. When Molly showed up that afternoon, I already knew what I had to do. I'd spent hours in that sterile hospital room, going over everything in my head, everything I'd learned, everything I still didn't know, and I couldn't stay quiet any longer. I was still feeling weak from the accident, my body still sore and stiff, but my mind was sharp. I wasn't going to sit here and let her keep lying to me. Not anymore. She walked into the room with that same fake smile she'd been wearing the past few days, the one that didn't reach her eyes. She sat down on the chair next to my bed, smoothing her hair over her shoulder like everything was fine. "Hey," she said, her voice a little too bright. "How are you feeling today?" I couldn't play along anymore. I couldn't pretend everything was okay. "I'm not fine, Molly," I said, my voice rough. "Not by a long shot. And I need answers." Her eyes flickered for a second, like she was caught off guard. But then she quickly masked it with a soft sigh. "Nate, you've been through a lot. Maybe you should just rest, okay?" "No." I pushed myself up against the pillows, ignoring the ache in my back. "You're going to tell me the truth. About the hotel. About Derek. About everything." Her face went blank, her posture stiffening. I could tell she was already preparing to dodge the questions, to give me some vague answer like she always did. But I wasn't letting her off the hook. "I saw your car," I said, my eyes locked on hers. "2 weeks ago, parked outside that downtown hotel. I called you, but you gave me some excuse about being at a friend's house. And I know you were lying." Her lips pressed together, and she shook her head, her voice tight. "Nate, you're overthinking this. I told you I was at a friend's place. You're just spiraling. This accident has messed with your head." I could feel the anger bubbling up in me, hot and raw. Spiraling? I wasn't spiraling. I was seeing things clearly for the first time in a long time. "No, Molly, you're not getting off that easy," I shot back. "I saw you, leaving the hotel with a man. A guy I've never seen before." Her hands were shaking now, but she folded them tightly in her lap, trying to control the tremor. "Nate, stop. You're imagining things. You need to focus on getting better." I wasn't about to let her change the subject. "I'm not imagining anything, and I'm not stupid. That guy, Derek, he's been showing up too much. He was the one who found me at the crash site, and I didn't even remember talking to him on the phone. But there's a damn call log showing he called me. Before the crash." Her face drained of color, but she quickly recovered, smoothing out the tension in her expression. "Nate, you're letting the accident mess with your mind. Derek's just trying to help. He's been there for you. For both of us." I narrowed my eyes. "Help? He's not trying to help, Molly. He's manipulating you. He's manipulating us. And I'm done pretending like everything's fine when it's clearly falling apart." I pushed myself out of the bed, ignoring the sharp jolt of pain in my ribs, and grabbed my phone. I pulled up the draft of the message I'd never sent, the one that was supposed to be my confrontation. I shoved the screen in her face, my hands shaking with frustration. "Look at this," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "I was going to confront you. Before the accident. I was going to ask you about him, about us. Why didn't you tell me what was going on?" Molly's eyes flicked to the phone screen, but she didn't take it. Instead, she let out a short, forced laugh, shaking her head. You're so paranoid, Nate. The accident has really done a number on you. You're seeing things that aren't there." I saw red then. I could feel the anger rising like a wave, threatening to drown me. I'd been patient. I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt, but there was no more patience left. "No, Molly, I'm not paranoid. I'm not crazy." I took a step closer to her, my voice steady now, but hard as stone. "You're lying, and I want the truth. Now." She stood up abruptly, her face flushed with a mix of guilt and anger. "You don't get it, do you?" she spat. "You've been through trauma, Nate. You're just looking for a reason to blame someone. To blame me." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut, but I wasn't backing down. "Don't you dare turn this on me. You've been hiding something. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to find out." Her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "You don't know what you're talking about." I'm trying to be here for you. And this is how you repay me." Her voice cracked, but she didn't wait for me to answer. "I can't do this anymore." And with that, she stormed out of the room, her footsteps loud and quick. The door slammed behind her, and I was left there, the silence in the room like a weight pressing down on my chest. I was shaking with anger and frustration. My heart was pounding, but a part of me felt empty, like the air had been sucked out of the room. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. Instead, I grabbed my phone again. My fingers were slick with sweat as I tapped in Derek's name. I found an address that led me straight to the place where I could finally confront him. I wasn't done. Not yet. Not until I had every damn answer. Sam didn't waste any time after I told him about Derek. He was already making calls, tracking down any information he could find. I knew he'd get results faster than anyone, but it still felt like I was waiting on a time bomb to explode. Everything was closing in, and I needed answers. A couple of days later, Sam showed up at my place with a stack of papers and a grim look on his face. He dropped them onto the kitchen table, looking like he hadn't slept in hours. His eyes were bloodshot, but the determination in them hadn't wavered. "I found some stuff," he said, his voice low. "Some stuff that doesn't sit right." I didn't even ask what it was. I could already tell from the way he said it that this was bad. I didn't want to know, but I had to. He flipped open the first page. "Derek King, he's a consultant, right? A big-time business guy. Real smooth, always wears that fancy suit. But behind that shiny exterior, it's a mess." I felt a sick knot tighten in my stomach. "How bad?" "Real bad." Sam pushed the papers toward me. A bunch of lawsuits, mostly from guys who lost their businesses. All of them got burned in nasty divorces. They say Derek helped their wives hide assets, all while keeping the guys in the dark. The kind of stuff that gets you blacklisted in business. I ran my fingers over the papers. My heart started to race. It made sense now. Derek's slick demeanor, the way he inserted himself into my life. He was used to this, to manipulation, to getting in people's heads right before they fell apart. "It gets worse," Sam continued, his voice a little rougher now. I dug through his history. Derek's got this pattern. He befriends people, men mostly, right before something major hits them. Financial collapse, divorce, you name it. It's like he's a trigger for these guys' worst moments. I stared at the papers in front of me, the weight of the information sinking in. So he's been doing this for years, using people for whatever he can get. "Yeah," Sam said, nodding. "And I think he's got his sights set on you, Nate. You're the perfect mark. Your business, your life. Everything's built on the edge of a knife, and he's just waiting to push it over." My mind was reeling, the pieces of the puzzle starting to lock together, but it still wasn't enough. "Not yet. I need to know more," I said, the words sharp. "About the crash. Was he involved?" Sam's eyes narrowed. "I've got a buddy at the police department. I'll ask him to dig into the investigation, see if anything connects Derek to the accident." I didn't wait for him to finish before I grabbed my phone. My pulse was quickening again, the urgency in my chest too strong to ignore. If Derek was behind this, I couldn't sit on the sidelines any longer. Sam made a few more calls, and after a while he came back, a small notebook in his hand. "I got something interesting. Your truck was in bad shape when they found it. But here's the thing. They matched some of the paint from your truck to Derek's car." I froze. "What? His car?" "Yeah," Sam confirmed, his voice tight. "That's what's in the police report. The paint on your truck is consistent with the color of Derek's car. So whatever happened that night, Derek was close enough to leave a trace." I felt my hands shake. I hadn't imagined it. Derek had been there. He was there, and now it wasn't just a feeling, it was fact. The crash hadn't been an accident. Derek had been involved, and somehow he'd made sure I was in the perfect position to fall apart. "Jesus," I muttered, rubbing my temples. "This is bigger than I thought." Sam nodded, his face grim. "Yeah, and I think it's time you go public with it. You're not the only one in this anymore. It's time to take Derek down." I looked at Sam, the weight of his words sinking in. He was right. I couldn't let Derek keep running the show. I was done being in the dark, done letting someone else control my life. All right, I said, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. Let's figure out how to bring him down. We need to get him on record. Something concrete. Sam gave me a sharp look, like he was calculating his next move. We start small, but we get him on everything. I'll work with my contacts, see what else I can find. If we dig deep enough, we can expose him for what he really is. I didn't even flinch. There was no turning back now. Derek had already crossed a line. He thought he could play me, mess with my life, my business, and my family. But he was wrong. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the weight of everything pushing down on me. It wasn't just about Molly anymore. It wasn't just about the crash. It was about taking back control of my life, and damn it, I was going to make sure Derek paid for what he'd done. This was war. I couldn't get Derek out of my head. The more I thought about him, the more the pieces of this mess started clicking together. Too perfectly. The crash, the way he'd inserted himself into my life, and now this, Molly's sudden coldness, the way she avoided me, the way she'd been acting like everything was just fine when it wasn't. I had no choice but to keep digging. I didn't wait for Sam to call me. I needed to find out everything I could about Derek on my own, so I started running my own background checks. I wanted to see where he'd been, what he'd been doing. And it didn't take long before I found something that made my blood run cold. Molly had been seeing Derek long before the crash. She'd been meeting him for business discussions, and not the kind of business you talk about in a conference room. No, these were meetings at a local hotel, the one I had seen her car parked outside of. The same hotel where I'd caught her leaving with him. I dug deeper. Sam's face was drawn as he looked over the evidence I'd found. He was already piecing things together as fast as I was. There's more, Sam said, shaking his head in disbelief. Molly's been meeting Derek in secret. They've been talking about divorce. I froze. Divorce? What the hell are you talking about? Derek's been advising her on how to separate from you without losing everything. Asset hiding, custody arrangements, the whole 9 yards. He's been coaching her on how to break you down without leaving a trace. I felt the room spin. It was like the floor had dropped out from under me. My own wife, the woman I thought I knew, had been planning this with him? I couldn't breathe for a moment. It hit me harder than I expected. That feeling of total betrayal. Molly wasn't just distant. She was plotting. She wasn't just pushing me away. She was preparing to take everything I'd worked for. And Derek? He wasn't just an opportunist. He was orchestrating the whole thing. The crash? That wasn't a random accident. He'd set it up to take me out of the picture, to push me out of the way so he could finish what he'd started. I couldn't just let that slide. Sam, I muttered, barely able to speak. We need to find them. Now. Sam gave me a hard look but didn't argue. He was already picking up his phone, making calls, tracking down any information he could. And when he came back a few hours later, he dropped the bomb on me. I got photos, Sam said, his voice low, like he didn't want to say it out loud. I've been talking to some people who work the hotels. Molly and Derek? They've been meeting up a lot more than you think. I got pictures of them, Nate, in the hotel room, talking about your assets, your business. They've been discussing how to get everything in the divorce. I couldn't hear him anymore. The room was too quiet, too still. I stared at the photos in disbelief. The life I thought I had completely unraveling before my eyes. There they were in a hotel room. Molly sitting across from Derek, papers spread out on the table between them. My papers, things from my business, my finances, all of it laid bare for him to pick apart like it was nothing. The reality of it crashed down on me all at once. My wife wasn't just distant. She was involved in something far darker than I ever could have imagined. And Derek? He wasn't just manipulating her. He was destroying me. I felt like I was suffocating, the betrayal hitting me in waves. I had been so damn blind, trusting her, thinking that things would get better. All the while, she'd been planning to tear it all apart with him. I had to get out of that room. I had to move. I didn't know where, but I couldn't stay still. So I walked, paced slow, the weight of everything pressing down on me. My knees felt weak, But I didn't stop. I needed to think. I could feel the rage building in my chest, the humiliation mixing with that deep, raw anger. They were playing me like a fool. They thought they could take everything from me, but they hadn't counted on me fighting back. I didn't know what my next step was. I didn't know how I was going to take them down, but I would expose them for what they'd done. I would make sure Derek never stepped foot in my life again. I wasn't going to let them win. Not like this. Sam, I said, finally turning back to him. We're going to make them pay for this. He looked up, his expression grim. How? By making sure everyone knows what they've been doing. We're going public. I'm not going to hide anymore. Sam didn't say anything at first, but after a beat, he nodded. All right, let's do it. And just like that, the wheels were in motion. It wasn't just about getting Derek out of my life anymore. It was about destroying everything they had been building, everything they had planned. I wasn't going to stand by while they took everything I had. Not anymore. The park was quiet when I arrived, the kind of quiet that made you feel like you were the only one left in the world. The air was thick with tension, and I could feel it all over my skin as I waited. I'd sent Molly a message, telling her I wanted to meet. No details, just that it was important. I wasn't sure if she'd show up, but I knew I couldn't do this in the sterile quiet of the hospital room. It had to be out in the open. She arrived a few minutes later, her car pulling into the lot with its usual too smooth, too perfect precision. Her face was pale when she got out, her eyes darting nervously around the empty space. She saw me standing there and, for the first time in what felt like weeks, there was a flicker of something, guilt, crossing her face before she smoothed it away. Nate. Her voice was small, uncertain, like she knew what was coming. She hesitated for a moment before walking toward me. I'm sorry. I should have told you everything. Couldn't let her play it like that. Not anymore. Not after everything she'd done. No, Molly. I didn't let my voice shake, even though every inch of me wanted to lose it. You don't get to apologize your way out of this. Her lips pressed tight, and she looked down at the ground, like she couldn't face me. I took a deep breath, keeping my cool, but the anger inside me was like a live wire, crackling, threatening to break loose. I have everything, Molly, I said, pulling out the files, the recordings, everything you and Derek have been doing. The hotel meetings, the plans, the divorce strategy, the lies. I have it all. She flinched when I handed her the tape recorder. I played it for her once, but now it felt like a final nail in the coffin. Derek's voice was smooth and calm, as always, talking about how to separate me from my assets, from my life, how to make it look like I'd crashed, like it was all just some accident, while he moved in on everything I'd worked for. Molly's hands shook as she listened, her face going from pale to red as the weight of what she'd been part of finally sank in. I watched her crumble under the truth, and I couldn't find a single ounce of sympathy in me. Not anymore. Her voice came out in a choked whisper. I didn't mean for it to go this far, Nate. I didn't know what to do. Derek promised it would be clean, that I wouldn't lose everything. You were shutting me out, and I felt like, no, I cut her off, my patience gone. You chose this. You chose him over me, over us. You decided that what you wanted was more important than everything we built together. She opened her mouth to argue, but I held up my hand, silencing her. This wasn't the time for her excuses. Here's the deal, I said, my voice steady now but hard. You get one choice, Molly. You can stay loyal to Derek, stick with him and face the consequences, or you can help me take him down. You've seen what he's done to us, to me, to our family. She was trembling now, her eyes shifting nervously, but I wasn't about to let her wriggle out of this. I can't keep lying for him. I can't, she whispered, her voice cracking. She looked so damn small, so broken under the weight of what she'd done. But I don't know if I can turn on him. Nate, he's powerful, and he's been so good at making me feel like he was the only one who cared. I stepped closer, making her look at me. That's how he works. He isolates you, makes you feel like you can't live without him, that he's the only one who's ever been there. But I was there, Molly. I was here and I still am. I've been trying to be here, and you've been pushing me away." She stood there, her eyes welling up, but I couldn't afford to feel sorry for her. Not anymore. Not after everything. "You're not just hurting me," I said. "You're hurting us. Our kids. You've been playing this game with Derek, but you've got to see that it's not just about me and you anymore. He's using both of us. And he's been using you to destroy our lives." Her face crumpled, the realization of what she'd done finally hitting her in full force. She started shaking her head like she couldn't take it in. "I didn't mean for it to go this far, Nate. I never thought it would get this bad. But it did," I said, my voice cold, final. "And you have a choice to make right now. Do you want to stay with him? Stick with the man who's been manipulating you the same way he's been manipulating me? Or do you want to help take him down and fix this? Because if you keep protecting him, then everything between us is over. There's no going back." She stared at me for a long, painful moment. I could see the battle inside her, the conflict in her eyes. But then something in her seemed to snap. She dropped her gaze, her shoulders slumping as the weight of it all finally crushed her. "I can't keep this up," she whispered. "I can't. You're right. He's done this to both of us. I'll help you. I'll testify against him. I can't live this lie anymore." I didn't say anything at first. I just stood there, staring at her. The reality of what had just happened settled in, and for the first time I felt something like peace. Not relief, no, not yet, but peace that I wasn't alone in this fight anymore. I exhaled, a long, slow breath, and finally spoke. "I don't know if we can ever fix this, Molly. Our marriage, everything we had, it's over. I can't trust you anymore. But for the kid's sake, we'll take him down. Together. And then we'll figure out what's next. But don't think for 1 second that this changes everything. You've betrayed me, and that's not something I can just forget." She nodded, her face wet with tears, her breath shaky. "I understand." And in that moment, I realized I didn't have to understand her anymore. I didn't have to carry the weight of our broken marriage, our broken trust, by myself. But I wasn't going to stop until Derek paid for everything he'd done. And neither would Molly, because in the end, that was the only thing left that mattered. Derek was arrested 3 weeks later. The charges were conspiracy, fraud, and racketeering. He'd been living high on the hog for too long, using other people's lives as pawns in his sick game. It wasn't just me he'd been targeting. He'd done the same thing to dozens of people, all of them left broken by his manipulation. But it was Molly's testimony, along with the evidence I had gathered, that made sure he never walked free again. The trial was brutal. Watching Derek sit there, all smug and self-assured like he was going to walk away without a scratch, made my blood boil. But we had the facts. His past, his dealings, the recordings, the photos, it was all laid out for the jury. And Molly, despite the mess she'd created, stood by me, giving her full testimony, giving us a chance to make sure Derek paid for what he'd done. I'd never forget the moment the verdict came in. Guilty. It was a punch in the gut, but in a good way. Derek's face went pale, and for the first time, he looked like he realized just how much trouble he was in. He wasn't walking away this time. When they took him away, I felt a small sense of relief, like I could finally exhale, like the weight that had been pressing down on me for months had been lifted just a little bit. But that relief was tempered by the bitterness of what I'd lost. Betrayal doesn't go away overnight. And no matter what the courts decided, it didn't erase what Molly had done, or the way I felt about it. Molly tried to make amends, but the damage was done. She couldn't take back the lies, the way she'd let herself be used, and I couldn't pretend that we could just pick up where we left off. I didn't want her back. Not in that way. The trust was gone, and so was my belief in everything we'd built. The business? It was thriving. The shop had been picking up more customers after everything went down. Word spreading that I was back in charge and running things the right way. I spent more hours than I'd like to admit working on the cars, but it was more than just work. It was my way of regaining control over something, anything. And for the first time in a long while, it felt like I was doing something right. My son, Eli, was the hardest part. He had been taking the brunt of it all, caught between Molly's coldness and my anger. He pulled away from me, from everyone, his teenage heart too confused and broken to understand everything that had happened. But slowly, we started to reconnect. I didn't expect him to forgive me overnight, but just being there, talking about cars, about life, about everything we had lost, it started to mend the distance. It wasn't easy. Hell, some days it felt like a battle, but we took it one step at a time. I made sure to show him I was still there, no matter how messy everything had gotten. The days ahead didn't feel perfect, but they felt real, and that was something. I was no longer drowning in the weight of lies. I could look my son in the eye without the shame of what had happened to our family. I had learned a lot from this mess, about people, about betrayal, about how fast everything you think you know can turn to dust. But I also learned something more important, that rebuilding wasn't about going back to the way things were. It was about moving forward, finding the strength to keep going, even when the road ahead looked uncertain. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had the strength to rebuild. My life, my business, and most importantly, my relationship with my son. The past was behind me. The future, it was waiting,